The story begins with a princess named Stella Vermilion who also happens to be the strongest and most gifted knight in her kingdom. She's been accepted into the prestigious Hagen Academy, which is famous for producing the best magical knights. We're also introduced to a man named Iki Korrigan who is an aspiring magical knight. Iki watches the news of Stella's arrival on TV and gets pissed off by it, so he turns it off before leaving his room. Outside, Iki summons his magical sword, Hintensu, and begins training intensely so he can become a blazer. Blazers are also called magical knights, and they're special beings who can manifest their souls as armor. After training, Iki returns home from jogging, but is surprised to see a pair of unknown shoes at the door. He enters his apartment and is taken aback when he sees Stella half-naked in his room. She's changing her clothes and gets flustered when she sees Iki. The atmosphere was already awkward enough, but for some reason, Iki felt that taking off his own clothes would make things better. As you'd expect, Stella gets even more uncomfortable and Iki's crazy gesture earns him a hard slap from her. Afterward, he is summoned to the director's office where he's scolded and forced to apologize to Stella. The director named Kurono Shinguji informs Iki that the girl is the famous Stella Vermilion and tells him that they're going to be roommates. It turns out that Iki is the worst magical knight in training at the academy, and since Stella happens to be the best one, the academy thought it would be a good idea to pair them together. Initially, Stella refuses to be Iki's roommate, and it's quite understandable since he's already given her a very creepy first impression. However, the director informs her that refusal to comply with their instructions would jeopardize her stay at the academy. As a result, she gives Iki 3 very strict conditions if they're going to be roommates. The first one is that he's not allowed to talk when she's in the room. Secondly, he's not allowed to open his eyes in the room, and finally, he's not even allowed to breathe when she's in the room. Clearly, these terms are outright insane and impossible, but even so, Iki agrees to comply if she's going to let him breathe in the room. Stella refuses to compromise because she doesn't want him to smell her, and the two end up arguing in the office. Seeing that the two weren't able to settle on their own, the director decides that they'll decide how things would go with a mock battle. During the fight, neither of them would suffer any physical damage but would have their energy drained every time they were hit. The two agree to fight since the winner would decide the rules of the room. A while later, the two arrive at the 4th training field. Before the fight, Stella asks Iki to surrender, claiming that he doesn't stand a chance against her despite his hard work and training. Sure enough, Iki refuses to surrender and the mock battle finally begins. Immediately, Stella charges at him and unleashes several flaming attacks on him, but Iki manages to hold his own against her. The two slug it out with each other in an intense fight, and in the end, Iki manages to memorize her attacks. He then uses his noble art to defeat her finally. Using this skill drains all of Iki's energy so much that it can only be done once a day. Even though he managed to defeat Stella, he faints in exhaustion moments after his victory. A while after the mock battle, Kurono visits Stella, who's still recovering from the defeat. She's still having a hard time believing that she lost because she hasn't been beaten in a very long time. Stella asks Kurono about Iki's strengths, claiming that she didn't expect him to be that strong since he's only an F-rank blazer. Kurono then explains that ranks do not evaluate swordplay and movement, which are the aspects that Iki has trained very hard to improve in. She then advises Stella to try and learn Iki's techniques so she can improve as well. Later, Stella goes to meet Ikak, who's still sleeping. She tries to wake him up, but in the process, he rolls over and her hand gets stuck under his body. As she tries to free herself, Iki wakes up and finds her in a very strange position. He asks her what she's doing, which startles her and causes her to hit her head on the wall and get injured. Stella apologizes for her behavior earlier as Iki tends to the injury on her head by placing a bandage on it. He forgives her and reminds her of the deal they made whereby the loser of the mock battle must obey the winner. Iki then asks her to be his roommate, and this time Stella agrees. The next day, we see a young girl riding a train and thinking about someone she loves who's currently going through a lot of pain for her. She thinks about how nobody loves him and decides that when she meets him, she's going to give him all the care that he's been deprived of. Meanwhile, at the academy, Iki and Stella are working out before the entrance ceremony of the Hagen Academy. Iki usually runs 20 kilometers every day and tells Stella that she doesn't have to join him if she doesn't want to. However, she states that she has a magical ability that would give her the physical strength to run with him. Iki offers her his sports drink, but she refuses, claiming that she would indirectly be kissing him if she sips from his bottle. He apologizes to her, suggesting that she has a problem with sharing objects with other people, but she immediately grabs the bottle out of his hand and takes a sip to prove him wrong. Remember that young girl on the train? Well, it turns out that she's Iki's younger sister who he hasn't seen in 4 years. He remembers that she would be arriving at the academy later that day and can't wait to see her after so long. Later, Iki and Stella attend their first class, and they're introduced to a new teacher named Yuri Oriki. Although Stella doesn't seem to be enjoying the class, Iki finds it interesting. Here he tells the students about the selection match of the 7-Star Sword Arts Festival, and afterward, a message from the director is played to the students, informing them that the students would be selected by actual duels with one another, and not just their ability scores and ranks like before. The selection matches would commence the following week, and the top 6 students would be picked as the school's representatives. Yuri informs the students that the match schedules would be sent to them through their emails and urges them to check regularly so they don't miss any updates. She also tells them that the matches are optional and that they aren't linked to their grades in any way, so anyone who doesn't want to participate can simply decline. Icky thinks about how he should use his noble art to fight since the fights would be every 3 days. While he's still pondering on the best technique to fight, Yuri suddenly starts vomiting blood and collapses in front of the students, leaving everyone horrified. Later, Icky and Stella visit Yuri in the infirmary where she tells them that she vomits at least a liter of blood every day. Afterwards, Stella and Icky are approached by another classmate, a girl named Kagami Kusakabe. She holds his arm and it becomes obvious that she's infatuated with him. Kagami tells Icky how impressed she was when he defeated Stella during the mock battle and invites him to an interview so he can be on the cover of the school newspaper. Not surprisingly, Stella gets a bit jealous and upset, so she decides to storm off, but just then, Icky's younger sister named Shizuku approaches them and suddenly kisses Icky on the lips. Guess the creepy first impressions are a family trait. This weird gesture gets Stella even more upset and jealous, and she begins scolding Icky for allowing his sister to kiss him on the lips. To most people, it's a weird thing, but for some reason, Icky and his sister don't see it that way. Just as Stella is berating Icky, Shizuku calls her out for interrupting their family reunion, especially since she's not related to them. However, Stella counters her by pointing out her relationship with Icky, since he's her master and she's obliged to do anything he asks her to. Hearing this, Shizuku gets furious and even contemplates killing Stella. Tension begins to rise and the two ladies brace themselves for a duel to earn Icky's affection. Icky tries to calm them down and stop them from fighting, but they ignore him, and after a brief exchange of insults, a fight ensues. As punishment for their misbehavior, Corona makes them clean the female restrooms for a week. She doesn't suspend them because it was only their first day and first offense. Later, at the dorms, Stella and Shizuku resume their argument. Shizuku tells Stella to stay away from her brother, and in the process, she accidentally reveals how much Icky was neglected by the rest of their family. Afterward, Shizuku goes to her room where she meets her roommate named Nanji Arisuin, who happens to be effeminate and prefers to be called Alice. Elsewhere, Stella keeps thinking about what Shizuku meant when she said Icky was neglected by his family, so she asks him about it. Ikle reveals that he was born without any talent to a family that was famous for producing great blazers. Icky tells her that his great-grandfather was Ryuma Kurogane, a powerful samurai who helped Japan to victory during the last war. Because Icky didn't have any gifts like the rest of his relatives, he was always ignored, and so one day, he decided to run away during a blizzard. The storm got worse and Icky was about to give up, but just then, Ryuma found him and saved him. The samurai encouraged him to believe in himself, and from that day, Icky vowed to train until he would become like his great-grandfather. Thanks to his hard work, he got accepted into the Hagen Academy, but unfortunately, other members of the Kurogane family weren't happy that Icky was attending the prestigious school to become a blazer, so they conspired with the school to set requirements that would make him a failure in the school. Although the harassment reduced drastically when Kurono Shinguji became the director, Icky states that she too is pressured by his family, and so he's concluded that they would always find a way to make him a failed knight. Later, Shizuku talks with Naji about her brother and all the things he suffered growing up. She tells him how she hated her family when she found out how they were mistreating him, and from that moment, she decided to shower Icky with all the love that he never got from the rest of the family. Elsewhere, we see Stella cooking while Icky takes a bath, and all of a sudden, she joins him in the bathroom in nothing but her underwear offering to wash his back like a good servant. Later, Stella and Icky are training together for the upcoming selection battles. After training, Stella, who's clearly developed feelings for Icky, decides to take the opportunity to ask him out on a date. Unfortunately, she's not able to because Icky suddenly receives a text message from Shizuku, inviting him to go shopping with her. He accepts the offer and Stella decides to join him even though she's upset that they can't go on a date. When they meet up with Shizuku, they see that she also invited her roommate, Alice, to join them on their shopping trip. At the mall, the two ladies compete for Icky's attention, and the oblivious guy falls for it each time. Stella gets upset when it seems like Shizuku keeps getting more attention than her. Eventually, the guys split up to use the restroom, but that's when the mall is suddenly attacked by armed robbers. The gang leader is a blazer named Bisho. They take all the customers hostage and demand a large ransom, not knowing that some magical knights in training are also present. When Corona finds out about the hostage situation, she contacts Icky and the others, permitting them to use their special devices to attack the robbers. A woman begs one of the gunmen to free them, but he refuses and instead kicks her. This makes her child furious, so he throws an ice cream at the man, but unfortunately, he also gets kicked by the man. The man then tries to kill him, but Stella intervenes. Thanks to her abilities, bullets don't do any harm to her, so even as the armed man unloads the rounds of bullets on her, she doesn't get hurt. Stella then attacks Bisho and his men, but he easily counters her by using his special device called the Judgment Ring to absorb her attack and then uses it on her. As punishment for trying to save the hostages, Bisho makes her take off her clothes in exchange for the freedom of some hostages. While Stella is reluctantly stripping, the perverted gunmen ogle her and Shizuku uses the distraction as an opportunity to create a magical barrier made of water to protect the hostages. Just then, Icky joins in the fight and uses his noble art to cut off Bisho's left arm so he can't use his Judgment Ring anymore. While that's happening, Stella uses her magical sword to take out the other armed men. However, one of them disguises herself as a hostage and tries to kill the real hostages, but before she can, another blazer named Shizuya Kirihara suddenly appears and disarms her before killing her effortlessly. Afterward, Stella confronts Kirihara for taking all the credit for the save, but he just laughs in response. He then asks Ikki to tell Stella the truth about how he ran away from their fight. He tells Ikki to check his mail and remind him of the 7-star battle. It turns out that Kirihara is Ikki's first opponent and that they were also matched up against each other the previous year when Ikki ran away from the fight. Soon the selection matches begin and we see Stella taking on her first opponent named Momotani, also known as the Heavy Tank. Unlike mock battles and phantom fights, the opponents get physically hurt in the selection battles. Stella uses her power of fire to increase the temperature tremendously, which causes Momotani to feel unbearable pain inside his armor. The heat gets too much to handle, and he eventually surrenders, giving Stella the win in that match. Later, Stella goes to see Ikki. He's been watching Kirihara's fights repeatedly, and when she asks him why, he explains that he's trying to study his techniques so he can know the best way to fight him. Kirihara has a special ability that allows him to turn invisible, and not just that, he can also make his entire presence undetectable, which makes him a master of surprise attacks. This special trait is what earned him the nickname, the Hunter. After explaining to her, Ikki promises Stella that he's going to defeat Kirihara this time because he's certain that his family won't be able to sabotage him like they did the last time. It turns out that during Ikki's last fight with Kirihara, the Kuroge and Head family connived with the former director to find reasons to expel him. The next day, Ikki's battle with Kirihara begins and all the students are seated to watch the much-anticipated 7-star matchup. As soon as the fight commences, Kirihara uses his special technique to turn invisible and fire arrows at Ikki. However, Ikki knows his tricks and so manages to strike Kirihara as well by tracing the origin of the visible arrows and finding the invisible opponent's location. Unfortunately, Kirihara quickly realizes his strategy and uses a newly improved ability to turn the arrows invisible, making it almost impossible for Ikki to know where they're coming from. As he strikes him over and over, Ikki suffers more injuries and looks like he's on the verge of death. Kirihara doesn't hold back and continues his onslaught while ridiculing Ikki and calling him the worst knight. When Stella sees how much pain Ikki is going through, she begins to shed tears. Regardless, she encourages him to get up and keep fighting. Ikki finally gets back on his feet and uses his noble art, the Shira, to remember all the attacks Kirihara unleashed on him and uses them to pinpoint the location the arrows are coming from as well as Kirihara's position. Using his noble art, Ikki deflects all the arrows as they come toward him and defeats Kirihara to win the match. After his victory, all the students begin to cheer him on, and as he listens to all of their praises, he collapses from exhaustion once again. Later that evening in the hospital room, Stella visits Ikki to see how he's doing, and while they're talking, he finally reveals the feelings he has for her. He admits that he's happy to have met her. Stella, who's also in love with Ikki, is pleased to hear this, so she kisses him on the cheek. Ikki tells her how much he wants to become the highest-ranked knight, and so the two promise to win all their matches so they can face each other in the final match of the 7-star selection festival. It's been 2 weeks since Ikki defeated Kirihara, and he's gone on to win 4 more matches in the tournament. This accomplishment doesn't go unnoticed among the other students because he's no longer dubbed the worst one like he was when he first got into the academy. Now the students are calling him another one, which probably means that he's the other best blazer in the academy. Ikki becomes more popular with each passing day, and some other students even ask him to teach them his swordplay and movement so they can improve. However, his popularity seems to be making some of the seniors a bit upset. When Stella finds out that he's teaching potential opponents his sword skills, she advises him not to since he would be giving the competition an advantage. However, he tells her that he doesn't mind teaching them because the skills could help them in times of danger. When his teaching finally begins, some seniors arrive and try to attack him, but he effortlessly takes them out even without using his device. At this point, the seniors realize that they're no match for him, so they ask him to teach them his technique as well. If you can't beat them, you join them. Am I right? Later, Ikki invites Stella to his lessons at the pool where Shizuku and other girls would be waiting for him. Hearing this, Stella gets jealous again and calls him out for not wanting to teach her. Ikki calms her down and explains to her that she's already too advanced for him to teach the basic lessons that he's teaching the other students. More so, they have different fighting styles and he doesn't want her to damage her sword by trying out a very different style. Ikki finally manages to convince Stella to follow him to the pool. When they arrive, he teaches all the other students how to improve their lung capacity by holding their breath. Meanwhile, Stella watches him teaching them from afar. She wishes he would notice the swimsuit she picked out, but unfortunately, he's too busy teaching the other students. Eventually, she gets bored and decides to try out the exercise that he's teaching them, so she goes underwater and holds her breath while trying to focus. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Shizuku talks with Alice about her feelings for Ikki. Alice encourages her and assures her that she can win Ikki's heart, even though he's her brother. At this point, it seems Shizuku may have gone overboard with her desire to make Ikki feel loved. At the swimming pool, Stella is approached by Kagami And when the two get back to the surface, she asks Stella about her relationship with Iki. Stella gets shy and is reluctant to say anything. Kagami eventually deduces that they're a couple and Stella confirms it but also admits that they haven't spent much time together since then. Kagami then advises her to take the initiative in the relationship and open up since Iki isn't. Stella takes the advice and decides to ask Iki about her swimsuit, even though he admits that she looks very good in it. Stella isn't satisfied because she feels he no longer likes her. This leads to a small argument, and at this point one has to wonder, what do women really want? Eventually, Iki manages to calm her down with sweet words and suggests that they blur out what they're both thinking. They both want to kiss each other, and in that moment, as if they have a telepathic connection, the two share a romantic moment with a kiss by the pool. On the way back home, Iki and Stella find out that their next opponents in the 7-star battle are members of the student council named Suju and Tomura. When the fight arrives, Iki and Stella defeat their opponents and continue to make progress in the selection tournament. After the match, Iki realizes that he's been stalked by one of the female students throughout the past week. She eventually reveals herself and introduces herself as Ayase Ayatsuji, the daughter of Kaido Ayatsuji, a famous swordsman. Ayase wanted to ask Iki to help her improve her swordsmanship, but didn't know how to approach him directly because of her fear of men. When Iki realizes this, he agrees to help her, which surprises both Stella and Shizuku. When the training begins, he deduces that Ayase's problem is because she's trying to imitate her father's style, which is impossible to achieve. As a result, he then suggests that she must adjust her position by understanding her anatomy, since that's the only way she can imitate her father's style. Ayase takes the advice and is finally able to land a hit on Iki with ease. Later, on the way home, Stella asks Shizuku if she is jealous of Ayase, and she states that she isn't. Hearing this, Shizuku tells Stella that she hopes she would always take care of Iki and never betray him. Later, Stella asks Iki about his feelings for Ayase, but he assures Stella that he only has feelings for her and no one else. While having dinner one night, Iki and Stella meet a blazer named Kurado Kurashiki. It turns out that he knows Ayase and hates swordsmen. The guy begins harassing Ayase, so Iki stands up for her, but also gets injured. Afterward, they're approached by Yudakata Misogi and Kaneda Tokubara, members of the student council, who commend Iki for keeping his cool and not retaliating against Kurado. On the way home, Iki and Ayase receive an interesting surprise when they find out that they'd be facing each other in the next match. After that, Ayase stops attending Iki's training sessions and then asks him to meet her on the school rooftop. When Iki meets her on the rooftop, Ayase suddenly jumps off, so Iki is forced to use his noble art to save her. After saving her, Ayase reveals that the meetup was part of her plan to prevent Iki from using his Ito Shira abilities during the match, which is in a few hours since he can only use it once every 24 hours. A desperate strategy, but that just shows how determined she is to win. Iki, who is now weak and exhausted, manages to make it back to his room where Stella, who was having an erotic dream, wakes up to help him. Iki finally discovers why Ayase is so desperate to win. It turns out that her father, who happens to be the last samurai, fell unconscious and lost his pride along with his ability to hold his sword after suffering a humiliating defeat to a man named Kurashiki, the Sword Eater. As a result, Ayase wants to win so she can avenge her father and bring pride back to their family. The odds are stacked against Iki at this point, because he has to fight Ayase without his abilities, and to make matters worse, they'd be fighting on a battlefield rigged with traps set by Ayase. Despite sustaining serious damage during the fight, Iki is not only able to see through and defeat Ayase's technique to win, but also even break through to her, and offer his help so that she could regain what she has lost. After the match, Iki goes with Stella and Ayase to her family dojo and challenges Kurashiki to a duel to win the dojo back. An intense fight ensues and Iki takes some significant damage from Kurashiki's Orochimaru, reminding Ayase of her father's defeat. Ayase decides that she can't let Iki take any more damage and asks to stop the fight, but Stella stops Ayase, telling her that she won't be able to get the dojo back if she does. It turns out that Iki is actually having fun and enjoying the fight, just like her father did during his fight with Kurashiki. Ayase then realizes that the apology her father gave at the end of the fight was to Kurashiki for not being able to execute his final move and collapsing midway in the match. Iki then uses Ayase's father's secret technique to win the fight and in turn reclaims the dojo and the Ayatsuji Ito style for Ayase. Later, Ayase confesses her foul play to the school and afterward, her father regains consciousness in the hospital. Later, Kurono sends Iki and Stella to a training camp. Initially, Stella is excited to go because she believes she would get the chance to spend some quality time alone with Iki. Unfortunately, that's not the case because in reality, they've been sent to help the student council with cleaning up the training field. After cleaning, Stella finds out that she's fallen sick with a fever, but her ambition to spend time with Iki doesn't falter and she insists on climbing up the mountains to view the waterfall with him. Along the way, they're caught in a sudden storm, so they take refuge in an abandoned lodge. Eke sets a fire and helps her take off her wet clothes. There, they're attacked by a puppet user Blazer who controls golems. Thankfully, they're saved by the student council members while student council president Tokatoto takes on the blazer by herself. Meanwhile, Shizuku returns to the Kurogein mansion to meet her father. He commends her for her progress in the tournament so far and assures her that she'll get a spot as one of the representatives. Later, she finds out that she'll be fighting Toka Todo in her next selection match. Back in Hagun Academy, Ikki and Stella are worried about Shizuku because they've witnessed how powerful Toka is for themselves. However, when the battle arrives, Shizuku is determined to win to prove that she's strong enough to stand beside her brother against everyone, especially the Kurogein family. Toka, on the other hand, doesn't seem disturbed in the slightest. As the fight continues, Shizuku realizes that Toka is faster and stronger than her, so she decides to take the defensive approach by using long-range weapons along with water and ice attacks from afar. Shizuku gives herself the upper hand when she covers the arena in ice to give, but once again, Toka easily counters all her attacks. Toka suddenly unleashes a barrage of attacks on Shizuku. However, she's determined to win the match so she can go to the 7-Star Festival with Ikki, so she tries to finish the fight with a surprise attack. Shizuku covers the arena with a thick mist and then tries to sneak up on Toka with her sword, but Toka uses her special technique to strike Shizuku first, and this earns Toka the win. Later, they visit Shizuku at the hospital, but she asks to be left alone. Alice doesn't leave, however, but stays back to comfort her. Meanwhile, when Ikki and Stella are heading home, they share a kiss and someone secretly takes a picture of them. Later, Ikki and Stella find out that the Ethics Committee, which is controlled by the Kurogein family, created a scandal by photographing Stella and Ikki kissing on school grounds. This leads to Ikki getting arrested by his father's henchman named Haza. He is placed in a special prison, which also happens to be owned by the Kurogein family. There, Ikki is interrogated, and they also force him to fight the selection matches even while being incarcerated. Even after all the schemes to make him fail, Ikki continues to win his matches. During one of his trials, he asks to speak to his father, which is surprisingly allowed. Ikki's father tells him to quit the selection process because his winning means that he would be inspiring those without magical abilities and giving them hope that they can also win, which would cause unrest in his organization. Hearing this, Ikki is heartbroken that his father still refuses to acknowledge him, but when Yuri slips in a lock of Stella's hair, he's reminded of his promise to meet Stella at the 7-Star Sword Art Festival. Later, Ikki finds out that his final opponent in the selection matches will be Toka Todo. Ikki is also informed that if he loses, he must give up his dream of participating in the 7-Star Festival. For Ikki's final match against Toka Todo, the much-anticipated battle would be televised to the whole world. Meanwhile, Stella and Alice win their final matches to earn their spots at the 7 Stars Battle Festival. Despite being exhausted and badly wounded from previous matches he fought in prison, Ikki escapes from the prison and arrives at the arena in time to avoid disqualification. When he steps into the arena, he's cheered on by all the students at Hagun Academy. Toka Todo is confident that she's going to win because she knows how weak Ikki is, but still wants to test his resolve to fight for the weak. When the battle begins, Ikki uses the 7th secret sword, Reiko, and by pushing himself to the limit, he manages to defeat her and even destroys her sword, earning him the win. His victory shocks Akaza and he refuses to accept the outcome of the match. Enraged, Akaza tries to attack Ikki, but Stella runs to his rescue and easily knocks off Akaza along the way. Suddenly, Ikki proposes to Stella while everything is still being broadcast to the entire world. Elsewhere, the Emperor of Vermilion, who is also following the battle, calls Ikki's father and suggests that their children should be drawn into the politics of their parents. Afterward, a ceremony is held honoring the school's 6 representatives for the 7-Star Sword Arts Festival, and Ikki is named the leader and flag bearer by Toka Todo. Later, Ikki talks with Stella about his proposal, and they're interrupted by Shizuku and Alice. Shizuku suddenly begins to create new rules to teach Stella how to become a bride. However, Stella believes that some of the rules are made up and responds by creating rules of her own. That's all for today's recap. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.